Now we're rolling. Damage Plan MMA podcast. I'm Jason, as always, my co-host, Mr. Zack Partridge, in the house. What up, dog? We have a special guest with us today on our Fighter Spotlight podcast. We are welcoming Mr. Aaron Ace Reis, owner of Fusion MMA and Jiu Jitsu down in St. George. Also, the promoter of Crown Fighting Championship that will be happening August 27th at Legacy Park in Hurricane, Utah. Ace, welcome to the podcast. We're excited to have you on today.
Oh, man. Thank you guys for having. Really appreciate you guys having me on. Been excited to come and chit-chat with you, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when did you decide it was time for because if people don't know, Crown Fighting Championship was you guys had a good show back in the day. It's been a while. When did you decide it was time to come back?
Actually, it's my partner. My partner is Scott, who's the main promoter. I do the matchmaking for Crown. When another promoter had come to St. George and didn't really take care of the fighters or do, those things. I don't want to say too much, but, didn't.
We all know who it is.
Go, it didn't go the way that we did things. And so he came up to me. He's like, he came to watch my son fight. And he's like, Ace, we need to bring Crown back and, do fights here good so people don't come and do it wrong. So I looked at him at first. I'm like, are you sure? Because, it's been 10 years since we did it. And we used to have really, really big shows, had some, great fighters on it and things. So I'm like, that's a lot of work. And he's like, let's do it. So I'm like, well, I'll only do it with him. So we decided to bring it back.
I mean,
that's awesome.
You talk about great fighters. Gilbert Burns' pro debut was on Crown Fighting Championship.
Oh, yes. I didn't even know that was amazing time. I got to train. It's crazy because the day of the fight, Vitor Belfort was there to, corner him. And I thought he was Gilbert's coach. Vitor told me, he goes, no, Gilbert right now is my jiu-jitsu coach. So the day of the fights for like 4 hours, he was training like him and Gilbert. I was the body bag. So I put all the gear on and the mitts taking shots, and Gilbert just beat me up for 4 hours. And I'm like, man, this guy's training like it's a practice day. And literally everything he did in that drilling is what he did in the fight. It was insane.
Wow.
That was like the best pain I ever felt. And like getting hit by Belfort and Gilbert. Like, who's going to complain about that?
Yeah.
You need to call Gilbert back and be like, hey, man, listen, I know you're in a contract with the UFC, but you could at least come cage fight for me.
I tagged him on Instagram and he commented back, hey, my first pro fight. I'm like, all right, cool.
Oh, that's so cool.
That is awesome. That is he was supposed to come on our podcast back in the day.
Yeah, he was really such a good dude. It was really cool to experience meeting him.
So from what we understand, you're going to have a mix of MMA and kickboxing, right?
Yes. So right now we're going to have 4 to 5 kickboxing matches and then try to book like 10 MMA fights because we all know how that goes. As it gets closer, it goes up and down. So as long as we can stick around that number, we'll be good to go.
Cool.
That's awesome. Cool. Yeah, it sounds like there's some guys from Zack's gym that's fighting. There's some ladies from my gym that are fighting down there. I'm excited. I'm excited to come down and check it out.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to watch the girl fights, especially for kickboxing. I know it's starting to get really popular again in Utah. It's been a long time. It went through a phase where Muay Thai was really huge for a little bit, then it fizzled out completely, went straight MMA, and now it's starting to come back, which I think is great to see.
I think it's great, and maybe you've been around long enough. Maybe you figured this out. I can't figure it out. All these people just want to see people stand and bang it out, right? They go to the ground and like, yeah, stand them up, you got those idiots.
Yeah.
And it's like, why don't you guys go watch like kickboxing and Muay Thai? And they don't watch it. Why do you think kickboxing and Muay Thai hasn't picked up more here?
I just think the overall popularity as far as mainstream, it's either boxing or MMA. Only in like Asia do you see like on one, on one championship that their kickboxing is very popular. Plus, I think in the 80s, they kind of wrecked it because back then the kickboxing was very horrible. Like they couldn't really box and they would throw some ugly kicks. There was really only a few superstars who were like phenomenal kickboxers. And then the rest were like below average. And it just made the sport never take off like it should have. And then, like I said, it was at the late 90s, early 2000s here in Utah, the Muay Thai Institute, all those people, they were having a lot of Muay Thai fights. It started catching up wind, and then it kind of just died out. And I don't know what caused that. And then only just recently has it started to make its, back to, oh, cool, this is a great event. I think it's a good mix, to add both. I still don't think as far as like a huge event that people would come to just watch that yet. Maybe in Salt Lake where there's more of a crowd, but I think, blending it together is a great combination for people that just want to see, the ones who aren't as educated in MMA, they get their stand and bang. And then, okay, now the little bit more educated fans can enjoy the hard work that it takes to take someone off of a cage. Absolutely. That's not as easy as it looks.
Absolutely.
Do you think it helps that they change the rule setting so that they can have the matches now in the cage, that maybe that'll kind of spark a fire?
Absolutely. I think that is so big to be able to do both events in one type of ring. Trying to do MMA, like when my first original team, I had a really big MMA team back in the days. And when we would fight in Vegas, it was in a ring. And man, that is very difficult. I'm over there yelling, you got to get to the turnbuckle to climb up, because you can't do it on the ropes. It was very different. So I like seeing the kickboxing in the cage. They see the big gloves, so the crowd knows already, okay, there's going to be no takedown, so they can see the difference. And then, if it's a good, exciting fight, it makes for a great event.
Right. Are there any, do you have any matchups or anything that you can announce, or names that
I've got verbal agreements, like I said, between both of you guys' gyms. I'm getting, that finalized, and then I can, put the word out, but I'm really excited about the female matchups that are, verbally committed. I think are going to be great. And then I think there's another, like a couple of guy fights that I've got that should be really, really exciting on both ends from what I know of both of them. The one that's coming out of my gym, if he does what he could, I mean, he's very dynamic in his striking, so it'll be his first fight, but just, training him, he's very dynamic. So it should be a really good fight either way, because I know his opponent is going to be prepared and coming out to bang, just because I know his trainer, he's like my brother. So I already know how prepared that guy's going to be. So I have no doubt that is going to be a buzzsaw. Whose cardio pushes who is what I see on that one going down, because it's going to be like a kung fu theater for sure. Yeah.
How often are you planning on having, like, Crown Fighting Championships back? How often are you planning on having shows?
Not many. I don't have the time to do often. I just wanted to make sure that we do enough. So, we keep it in St. George, not going anywhere, not trying to travel anywhere with it, just to have good events. So, we keep not good promoters out of it, so that way it just keeps the quality up. The people know what they're going to get. They get a good venue. They get a good, entertainment night. The fighters have a good time, well taken care of, so we're probably doing 2, no more than 3 a year tops, because I really want to just be a good feeder show for the 2 other big promotions anytime. I'm not trying to, Crown back then in the beginning was huge. I mean, we used to have 2,000 plus people at our event. And, so it was a really, really huge show, very well produced. We used to do it at the convention center, but they're now booked out an entire year. So we had to move it to Hurricane. But I'm not trying to, push that like we did. We used to do like 4 shows back then. Like, I would rather be a good, nice, solid show for fighters to now say, hey, look, I've got connections to push you here and there. I can make sure that we can get you on to the right people to get you onto those fights and help push your career. I just really want to have good shows, but more of a feeder to the main woods up in Utah would be good for me.
That's awesome.
That is cool. That's perfect. I want to touch on something that you said, talking about preparing a fighter to fight somebody who's being trained by somebody that's like a brother to you. What's that like when you are cornering your fighters that you obviously are super invested in, care about as people and as fighters and stuff too? And then, a lot of the coaches, like, you've been around a long time, you're friends with a lot of the coaches at other gyms and stuff. What's it like cornering against your friends?
At first it was really weird. Like, when we first started, I was very lucky that my jiu-jitsu coach, Justin Ellison, him and Jeremy Horn are like best friends. Yeah. And he opened up the door to me to Horn from years ago. I've got a picture when Jeremy, I don't even know if he had moved to Utah yet, but he was here and he had come down to St. George, and I had a tiny little school on the boulevard at that time. And, he was still fighting at big shows, and he came and showed me some things. And I was like, wow, this is Jeremy Horn. He's like a legend. And, so back then I was like, well, I don't want to fight his guys. I'm like, I come here and I learn, and, he's always let me come whenever I wanted. And, allowed me to, come up and see when he was training for Chuck the second time. I got to spend like a week and a half up there and just see what he does and hang out with those guys. So at first it was really difficult to do that. And then, he said something to me, and we're talking when I had a really good fighter back in the days, Gordon Bell, that was coming up. And, he's like, look, dude, at this point, they have no choice but to fight. And all I asked was, hey, is this still cool? Can I come train with you? He's like, of course. And I'm like, all right. I never wanted to ruin that. And this was one of the coolest things that I think Utah does, at least for myself, is, just like what you said, I'm very close and connected with pretty much the majority of the gyms. And it's awesome to see that, when we get together, we all hang out, we chit chat, we go and train at each other's gyms. I've got guys from both of your guys' gyms that come down to St. George a lot. I make jokes and say, hey, are you, can you like hashtag me at the end of your, thing? We just, fun around because they come so much that, and then when we fight, there's no hard feelings. Like, look, we're going to go beat each other's butts. And then afterwards, we're going to go hang out again. And I'm still going to come and train at your place. You're going to come train at mine. There's nothing cooler than that. Like just this past weekend with with Dane, I have nothing but the hugest respect for Dana Ristazabo. That guy is, he's been around here in Utah for a long time. And, for both of my guys and his guys to fight. And, the whole time we're just chit chatting and he was so cool at weigh-ins, like, just to relax. You don't see that a lot outside of Utah at other promotions. There's usually maybe they're semi-cool, but not like here where it's like, look, we're going to fight each other at 100%. And then after we're going to dinner together. That to me is awesome.
Like one of our goals is bringing like MMA back to Utah County, right? And they love it down there and bringing it back. It was a first-time experience for a lot of people there. Like our cage-side doctor, he'd never been to an MMA fight. He was kind of a newer guy. And then some other people and the people from the high school that hosted it, they're like, they couldn't believe how like respectful all the fighters were and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the more we can get that part of the MMA, the spotlight on that part of this sport on, the more people are just going to fall in love with it because it's mainstream now, right? Like it's no different than you see these basketball players and football players all chit chat after, our sport just happens to be a little more violent,
a little more violent.
And so it's cool to see that, when two guys can get in there and fight each other and then come out and show such respect. And, there's always that one or few instance where one fighter has, a bad attitude and maybe they're not like that. But that to me is so far in between compared to like, what I seen with my guys afterwards, sitting with Dane's guys, chit-chatting and congratulating each other. And then, they root for each other. And then again, I guarantee down the road, they're going to train with each other and help each other, push. I love seeing that because at the end of the day, the fight career is short. Nobody fights forever, but the connections and the friendships that you meet, sparring and rolling, those things last forever.
Yeah, absolutely. I just, it's such a unique sport. And once I found it, it's like my interest in most other sports has fizzled quite a bit.
I just started training 6 months ago, and I keep telling myself, I wish I would have started 20 years ago when I was a lot younger.
Trust me too. It's funny because I did start jiu-jitsu, not older, but I should have started because I always tell people about this crazy story. When I was in intermediate school, Helson Gracie lived right across the street in Hawaii. And my buddy Todd started training. And in Hawaii, nobody likes to grapple. Everyone wants to fist fight. And if you ever, watch on YouTube, just like Hawaii kids fighting, they look like professional kickboxers. In Hawaii, it's like, nobody wants to do that. But he started with Helson, and he's been with Helson ever since. And I always tell him, I said, why didn't you just tackle me and choke me a few times to say, hey, why don't you come across the street with me and learn this stuff? I'm like, man, I wish I started way back then.
Yeah. It's really awesome. For your event, as it gets closer and stuff, how are people going to be able to buy tickets?
All the tickets will be online. That website should be ready to go in the next 2 days. So Sweet. Just finalizing that. So everything will just be online, the tickets, the tables, all of that, make it nice and simple and easy for people to get. And, if they want to support a fighter, they can just type that name in. That fighter will get that credit for their commission and make it nice and simple.
Perfect. I wish I could push a little bit more. I want to know who's fighting.
We're on that.
Oh man, like, as I said, as soon as I get, Devil Edge guys, like right now, it's all just verbally, and I've got a few that, it took a while because I know it's still semi out there. It's not like 8 weeks, but to me, I'd rather book them now. So, again, it's so funny because once my old fighters heard I was bringing them back, every single one, coach, get me back. I'm like, bro, you guys all retired 10 years ago. We're done with you guys.
Hey, these new age guys.
No, one more.
Don't be messing around with these new age guys, man. They're going to end up getting in there with a kid like your son that's going to take their head off.
It's another ball game. I'm like, dude, I get beat up by him and Zane all the time. I'm like, I hate both of you guys.
There was one name that I was hoping for, and it was your son's name, but I guess he's recovering a little bit from a little shoulder surgery.
Yeah, had shoulder surgery after his last ones. It's healing good. So, he's young, so he's got plenty of time to, keep dabbling and, see what happens. But, I keep it, very grounded on, what the reality is. The good thing is he grew up in it. So he's seen, a lot of my fighters who were pro fighters and, what it looks like, following that dream, seeing how far it goes, and then also knowing and having the reality of, hey, at some point that train does stop, and making sure that he's ready for that, next portion of life, which he's already, building now, with his own school and things like that.
So you touched on so he has his own school out there. So what is his school?
So they're both, they're the same, Ace Martial Arts. So the only difference between his and mine is they don't have like a fight team. They have, the kids martial arts, they have the adult Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So they have, they just started that for the year. They just produced their first couple of blue belts, and those guys are winning Jiu Jitsu tournaments. So they're producing just between him, Zane, and my other black belt, Alex, that teaches out there. Between the three of them, they're already, getting some really good Jiu Jitsu students out there. I show up there once in a blue moon because I get so used to, I'm in St. George. That's a 15-minute drive. That's far from me.
Yeah.
So most of the time, they'll show up to Open Med on Saturday, so I get to meet them. But I don't go out to his school too often. It's his own thing, and he's doing a great job. He's got a lot of kids, and his adult program's coming along.
How much do you think that helps him? And you said Zane's coaching out there too.
Yep. So
Zane, that helps them coaching fighting.
Oh, absolutely. It's one thing when you train and you know how to do a move. When you actually have to go back and teach it, especially to adults and young adults who are more like your peers, now you have to really understand the dynamics of the move. And also, what happens when someone stops it? Where do I go? It's like on a guard pass. Sure, you knee slice this way. Okay, but what happens when they block it? Okay, here's the next one. Okay, now they block that. And, for them to understand, the whole thing from, how to teach a whole flow series and really start to understand it is really awesome to watch because they're, so young and they're, able to teach from kids, through adults.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
So we know Christian, young up and coming stud. We saw Zane, kid's a stud. We saw Brock Labrum last weekend. Kid's got a bright future. How many more young studs you got down there?
We got Jeremiah, the heavyweight that
Jeremiah.
won the
I forgot
belt.
about him.
Jeremiah is such a great young man. That guy's story is just amazing because he's only early 20s and, he's got, I believe, 3 or 4 kids. He is an amazing family man, that guy. He works doing concrete, so he is in the sun all day long, goes home, takes care of his kids, and then shows up to the gym, to as many times as he possibly can, to train, and he gives 100%. That guy is just an absolute joy to train because he's so humble, very quiet, but no fun to get hit by.
Yeah. I heard he hits like a Mack truck.
Well, gosh, it doesn't feel good.
Well, you're out there doing concrete work out in construction under the sun. You're hard. You're pretty hard.
That's awesome. Right up there with the Dagestanis, isn't it?
These Polynesians, they were born to fight no matter where it goes. So, and I've got a very young team. Before, like I said, 10 years ago, I had about 20 hard guys that were fighting. Had a lot of fights. They were going in Utah. They were very well known. They had good records. They were really good fighters. Gordon at that time was my best one. Had come close to making it on the UFC show. He had beaten some really good guys, So he was probably my best one at the time. The young up and comers, I've got a very young, small team, and I go back and forth between, do I really push to build a big MMA team, or do I just keep it small with who I've got? It's difficult because, just within the small group, I'm getting too old. I don't want to deal with drama. I can't deal with that. And to me, honestly, I know some coaches can just brush it off, but when I spend so much time with somebody, it really hurts my feelings when someone gets up and leaves and then they badmouth you. Yeah. And I'm like, man, I've taught you since you were like 7 years old, like 12, 15 years, and you're going to say stuff. I'm like, it's not even true. So it's like, do I want to big teams? Keep it small. So far, I'm going to keep it small for now. And, if I feel some people fit in good, great, come aboard. If not, I'm more than happy to say, hey, you know what? It's just, I'm not, maybe somewhere else might be better for you.
You have such a beautiful gym too. Like, it's so big. I've gone down there and trained a couple times with y'all, and it's such a nice, like, big gym. Like, I would have thought like you had this huge fight team, and then I found out there's only a handful of them. I was like, geez, but you have a room full of killers too. Maybe not be fighters, but room full of killers. That's for sure.
Yeah, our jiu-jitsu guys, we've got a lot of really good jiu-jitsu students. So, so they compete enough in that to where sometimes when they decide maybe I want to do MMA, and then they come to that class and maybe not. And I'm like, hey, that's, completely up to you.
Everything's different than you're punched in the face.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a rumor though that Zane likes to pants people during his jiu-jitsu tournaments.
I don't know anything about that. Zane is so funny because I give that poor kid, bless his heart, he's got such a good soul, because I give him more crap in the gym because he's, good looking kid. He's muscular. So I always tease him and Christian that, I'm going to farm them out on the weekends to parties, and have them be like little dancers. And they just say, oh my gosh, coach, you're killing me. But they're so good. And, he's got such a fun demeanor. But then when he competes, he turns to a different animal. And it's funny because at jiu-jitsu tournaments, I don't know what it is, but people want to try and pick on him because of the way he looks. And it is just hilarious. And I'm like, ooh, that's not the guy to really try that to. Yeah. He's more than happy to oblige.
Yeah.
Christian just commented.
Oh gosh.
He pants Joel during their jiu-jitsu match. I think it was like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, one thing I noticed about Zane, just watching his last fight, cage side and stuff, he's a great fighter, but he is a showman and has a good charisma about him as well.
Really does.
He does. Like, I mean, he's very focused when it's time to fight. He loves that aspect. Like, to me, just competing. I competed in professional karate only, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's nerve wracking. And then it's like, okay, I got to get hit first, and okay, now I'm all right, I'm good to go. When he's in that zone from the time of weigh-ins to the time to fight, he is 100% ready. He's not nervous to fight. He's just super focused on what he needs to do.
You can tell there's some people that's just his element.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He loves it.
Yeah, it's awesome. Very cool. Very cool.
Well, I don't know about you, Zach, but I'm excited August 27th to come down and watch some fights down in St. George. Aaron, it was awesome having you on here today, talking about your gyms, talking about your promotion. Is there anybody you want to give a shout out to? Anything you want to say before we let you get out of here?
Always, I always got to give a shout out to my wife. She it's people come and see like, wow, you've got a big school. You have, a lot of students. And I'm like, I just work for her. She's the one that makes everything happen. And, so without her, the school doesn't go where it needs to. And, some people don't know she's got she has over 100 women in her women's only Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. It is awesome. Insane to see. And we always have the joke because I still have a big Jiu-Jitsu class, but man, I look over at hers and I'm like, holy smokes, where do you see that? And it's so awesome because a lot of the women in her class, they're not there to compete. It's just someone that, and people like you would never think would want to do Jiu-Jitsu, but she gets them to try it out, and then they end up falling in love with it. And, it's so good to see them my wife loves it to see, women build their confidence in themselves, not just the self-defense and that, but to just their own inner confidence and strength has been absolutely amazing. So, to her, I always got to give a shout out to, because I am the bottom of the totem pole between her and my son. They do a great job running the schools when I need to leave, or if I need to take a break, they take care of it. My younger son, he's heading off to pilot school, but he's a big instructor at my school, teaches all the kids classes. So, it's a big family affair. So without them, I don't get to do what I want. I've got great instructors that, come and work for me. So, we really have a great culture here, and I'm very blessed to have, good people around me and great friends and things like that, like you guys and everyone else. It's been awesome.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Ace, thank you again for joining us. We look forward to your fights. August 27th, Crown Fighting Championship, Legacy Park, Hurricane, Utah. Go check it out. Excited.
Thanks again, Ace. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you, Ace.
Thank you.
We are out. And it just takes a second for it to go.